Hi, this is Kevin Savitz, and this is an interview with Jim Capparell, who was founder and publisher of Antic Magazine, which was a magazine for the Atari 8-bit computers. The interview was conducted on August 13th, 2013, via Skype. I was at my house in Portland, Oregon. He was at his place in New Orleans, Louisiana. This is the full, complete, unedited, barely edited version of the interview. Lasts about an hour. A shorter, good parts version of the interview will be in the podcast that I co-host, which is called Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast, which is at AtariPodcast.com. If you want to look at Antic Magazine, the full text is available at my website, AtariMagazines.com. Full page image scans of the magazine are available at archive.org/details/antic-magazine. Finally, if you want to contact me, you can find me at savitz.com, SAVETZ.com. Okay, here's the interview.
You're in Portland, huh?
I'm in Portland. I love it here so much.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, there's a good bookstore there. That much I know.
Yes, there is. How do you like New Orleans?
It's okay. It's I really like the West Coast, and it was there an awful long time. So this is a little different, but it's an interesting town.
Yeah.
And it's what we're doing right now. So.
Cool.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I have all sorts of questions for you.
Well, hopefully I can be of some help here.
Excellent. The first thing I want to make sure.
It's been a long time since. You broke up there.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it's been a long time, and I realize not everything, you might not have answers or remember, and that's fine too. So.
Yeah, well, there was a time it consumed me, and that's a lot of years ago, and a lot of water under the bridge. But there was a time when I could bore you to tears with the magazine and Atari and computers and all of that stuff. It's but I guess age has a way of rounding those corners and edges and maybe putting things in perspective. I don't know.
Good.
But go ahead and do what you want to do here, and I'll try to try to make this. Try to be as forthright as I can.
Okay, excellent. The first thing I want you to know, just before we do anything, is as I was doing some research for this, I was looking at the domain names that you own, kitchenandculture.com and digitalmania-online.com, and they all expire in like a couple of days. You need to renew them.
Broke up on the last portion of that.
Darn it. All right, we can't have that. Your two domain names that I looked at all expire in a couple of days.
Yeah.
You need to renew them.
Yeah, the Digital Mania, I think, expires.
Yeah, and Kitchen and Culture.
Kitchen and Culture, of course, that's my wife's business, so
right.
I'll be renewing that. Digital Mania I've owned for probably 10 years now. Initially, I was going to do some iPod stuff with that. In fact, I even did for a short period of time an iPod magazine. And it was in the form factor of an iPod, actually, the same aspect ratio, and had that just for a short time. But anyway, that's what that was for. I haven't touched that website in a long time, and just sort of sits there and gets some AdSense revenue, and that's about it.
Yeah, it looked like it was maybe being ignored.
Oh, it's been ignored I don't think I've touched it for 5 years.
Yeah,
it just makes a few bucks every month on AdSense, and I've been I own iPhone Works and Using Time and some other things I've been playing around with, but just dabbling.
Yeah, cool.
But Kitchen and Culture is kitchenandculture.com is a real business. It's got a magazine behind it. That's my wife's magazine, and that comes out every other month, and that ships nationwide actually. So that's what we're doing here.
Excellent. And it looked like it was kind of maybe perhaps it could be one of many. I mean, one of the first. This was Louisiana.Kitchen and Culture.
Good observation. Louisiana.Kitchen and Culture. And the initial idea was we would do Louisiana.Kitchen and Culture. We're here. And that's where Susan has a lot of her energy and enthusiasm. But then, of course, You could do Southwest.Kitchen and Culture, California.Kitchen and Culture, Northeast. I had a whole list of them actually, and so the notion was a whole family of kitchen and culture websites, and that sort of sits there waiting for me to do something. But probably be sitting there a while waiting for me. But that's the way I rolled it out with Drupal. Is it's a Louisiana.Kitchen, Louisiana being the subdomain of kitchen and culture. And so what I envisioned was a whole bunch of subdomains, and that's still possible.
Cool. All right. Okay, so first of all, say your last name for me so I pronounce it correctly.
It is Capparell.
Capparell. All right.
And Grandpa's name was Capparelli, actually. Yeah.
Oh. And where was he from?
Well, we grew up in. I was raised in Rochester, New York, but my grandfather emigrated from Italy in the turn of the century, 1900s, 1910 or something, and from a town outside Naples. But so anyway, that's. But I was raised in upstate New York.
Okay. And how old are you?
I just had a birthday. I just turned 67.
Happy birthday.
Yeah. Well, I guess trying to make it happy. Trying to make it happy.
Was Antic your first magazine?
Yeah. It started. I got the idea. Actually, I don't know where I got the idea. I know where I got the idea. I was a professional programmer for a long time in Silicon Valley, and the job I was working at the time, I was working at NASA Ames Research Center at Moffett Field in Sunnyvale. Mm-hmm. And I was in the programmer for a small research group. We were researching motion sickness, and so I was in Silicon Valley quite a while, actually, all through the 70s, and doing programming. And the last job I had was at Moffett Field at NASA, and we were using biofeedback to control motion sickness. Anyway, I started a computer club called Atari Bay Area Computer User Society, Abacus for short, and started a newsletter. And I think that's the magazine Antic sprang from the newsletter.
I did not know that.
The notion of a magazine. And I remember pacing the floor one Sunday making pancakes and trying to think of a name for the new magazine, this idea I had. And I was coming up with all these names, and of course I was very familiar with the Atari 800 internals. And Antic, as you well know, was the alphanumeric television interface controller chip. Mm-hmm. That was an acronym, and it was the chip that really allowed the Atari to be such a powerful graphics box, because, as I'm sure you know, you could interrupt every scan line, and that's what gave Atari its tremendous game playing power, along with the sprites and so on. But it was the Antic chip. So I got the name Antic, and literally within a few minutes, we thought of this cockeyed kind of, typeface, and I was the model for the first cover. And that's, I'd never done magazines before. I just was off and running.
So I guess my next question was going to be, and I think you've started to answer it, was did you set off as an Atari guy who thought you should start a magazine, or did you start off as, I'm going to start a business, it's going to be a magazine about Ataris because that's where what people want to read?
No, I came really from my enthusiasm for the home computer business, which happened, and I got pulled in the direction of Atari. The reason was, going back to my NASA story at Moffett Field, doing this biofeedback. I was the research programmer and a lot of data, and I contacted Apple and I contacted Atari and asked them to give me equipment. I was not making a lot of dough. I was on a research contract, and Atari gave me the equipment. And a guy named Peter Rosenthal at Atari, who became a friend, liked my story and said, I'll give you the equipment, and did. And from there, I became an Atari guy. And, up until, this was in 82. Mm-hmm. But for the 4 or 5 years prior to that, I probably collected every computer magazine around. Byte, microcomputing, creative computing. I had so many magazines that at one point the Chinese consulate got wind of it and bought them all from me in San Francisco. They had heard about my collection, and I sold them all to the Chinese consulate. I had six or 7 years of computer magazines.
Do you have a sense of why the Chinese consulate wanted computer magazines?
Just being thorough. They just I had a good collection, and remember, this was at the beginning of the home computer age. There was something that went on in those days called the West Coast Computer Fair, and which was a big deal. I mean, it was really a big deal. It was a lot of fun, and I mean, the energy in the place. It was held at in San Francisco in the I can't remember the name, over there by City Hall. I can't think of the name of it. I want to say Convention Center, but it wasn't the convention. This was long before Moscone, by the way, and this was where they held the conventions, and still there, I'm sure, and they still hold conventions, but it's just a small place now, small venue, and what was I going to say about that? Just giving you the foundation. These things went on. The magazines were going on. So I was reading all these magazines. I was consumed by them. I got them all as soon as they came out. I wasn't the only one. I would buy them at the computer store. There were microcomputer stores in those days, and we go. And it was an excuse to just go down and sort of drool over the equipment.
Sure.
So I'd get all the magazines and take them home and read them all. And also, I think that's what got me interested in doing my own magazine as well. It was in my subconscious, in a sense. I'd read them all for 6 years, and then I got the equipment and I started playing around with it, so on and so forth. So, and then I started one of the first Atari user groups in the Bay Area, in San Francisco. Yep. I was the first. I think I might have been the first Atari user group.
So were you in charge of the newsletter, and then that's what?
Yeah, I did all that. I just was consumed by it. I did all that stuff, and then I had the research grant at NASA, so that was my full-time job. And then I just messed around all the time with this stuff, and then all things were good. All kinds of things were going on. Equipment was coming out, and there was all kinds of opportunities. And I used to go to all these different groups. I was a member of the fourth group. Don't even know that language, I'm sure.
I've heard of it. I don't.
Yeah, it's a very interesting language. But I remember. I don't know if you know who Scott Kim was. I remember going to meetings where Scott Kim is just interesting. You might check him out on Google. Does things with calligraphy, so you could read the same word in
upside
mirror
down.
image, upside down, backwards.
Yeah.
Pretty phenomenal. Go look him up. You'll like it. But so a lot of interesting guys were hanging around, and girls hanging around. So it was interesting times.
All right. So did you quit your job at NASA once the magazine took off, or?
How'd that go? Yeah. Or no, actually before. Let's see. How did that work? I left and then started the magazine.
Wow. So
just kind of one thing. I can't remember the details exactly. I left and then started the magazine.
Okay.
I think basically that was it.
And you decided. I mean, it was clear to you that it was going to be an Atari magazine as opposed to Commodore or whatever, because you were into the Atari machine.
Yeah, I really can't remember. It had to be that. I mean, that's what I knew. That's what I had. That was the only equipment I owned. Mm-hmm. And I saw these other magazines. I think there was a Commodore magazine already. Compute was a magazine I used to get, sure. And it covered a couple of magazines. It covered a couple of computers, Atari being amongst them. And so then I brought out Antic. And Antic became probably the most successful of all the Atari. I believe it was. Yeah, it had the biggest circulation and the widest distribution worldwide. We had subscribers all over the world. And we were the first magazine to include a bound-in floppy disk. I was the first magazine to actually. A lot of people did program listings,
Sure.
type them in. I might have been the first to include a checksum with it. When you typed in the basic program, we had a checksum program, so you could tell if you'd made a mistake.
Typo.
Yeah. And that's what it was called, right?
Yeah. It's called Typo. And then Typo 2 later.
Yeah, that's right. I've forgotten. So we did that, and then I did the CD bound in, or not CD. It was the floppy.
Right.
And we were the first magazine to do that, actually.
Wow.
And was on the newsstand that way, and I think you could even subscribe to it that way.
So was that difficult, jumping ahead a little bit, was that getting the disc in there, was that difficult logistics-wise, dealing with the printer or the distributor?
You have to repeat that. I couldn't hear it.
I said, since you were the first, am I coming through better now?
Yeah.
Since you were the first magazine to include a disc, was that difficult to deal with the printer or the distributor or whatever to make that happen?
It was. The printer, it was a difficult bindery problem. And then distribution there were issues. But that was the nature of the business, and we solved them all.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we had to deal with the printer, and it was a slowdown in bindery, and then it was a cost issue, as well as a failure rate. And, so it was all that. They had to be worked out.
Sure.
But we solved it.
So did you base Antic on any particular magazine that you looked at and said, okay, this is the thing I most want to be like, or did you just head off in your own direction?
I can't answer that. I don't recall. I read them all.
Sure.
And I have to say, I think I had a pretty good editorial feel. While never being a writer myself, although I could write, it never gave me much satisfaction to do it. I was more interested in the creative, that is the startup process, in the idea formation, and in getting my ideas promoted through you as a writer or other people, and in kind of engaging with people that way. That was fun. Mm-hmm. That's what I enjoyed. So I enjoyed that give and take in creating a product rather than doing the detailed work. I wasn't, writing didn't satisfy me very much. I never took much gratification in that. But the product itself, I did. So to answer your question, I don't recall it being modeled after anything other than, I had 6 years of stuff in my head, and I certainly had favorite issues of different magazines.
Sure.
I just think I had a good editorial sense. I was a product of my time, so basically I could probably speak for a lot of people, and did, actually.
So you said it's in Volume 4, Number 1, you alluded to the fact that you did the early issues on your kitchen table.
Yeah, we did.
So at what point did you switch to a real office or something?
Well, my initial, where we launched it, was I had an apartment at the corner of 18th and Missouri Street in San Francisco, on Potrero Hill. And literally, we worked out of there. I introduced the first issue of the magazine at the West Coast Computer Fair, and schlepped them all over there, and thinking that I was going to get rid of all of them. Of course, I didn't. I had printed, I think, 12,000, and had 10,000 left by the time I was done. And I went, Jesus, now what? Well, now what is I went to the library and I got all the yellow pages. This is before internet. And started calling computer stores nationwide and selling my magazine to them. And that's how I unloaded 10,000 magazines. And, of course, at the time, people were receptive. They just needed to know about it. And I picked up the phone, and I would start early in the morning and start calling the East Coast. And so, if I started calling at 6, it was 9 on the East Coast. And I get a lot of calls. And so then a guy became my distribution manager, worked for me for a number of years. Les Torek was his name. And he started doing the shipping. And I remember we'd schlep all these magazine boxes, wrap them up, and take them over to UPS, which wasn't too far from my Missouri Street address. I was there probably on the 4th day with 20 boxes. And the guy said, "You going to be doing this a lot?" I said, "Every day." He said, "UPS will come by and pick up." I said, "They will?" Well, that shows you the level of my sophistication. I didn't know that.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, I said, good. How do I do that? I said, well, here's the number, call them and arrange. And so I got a UPS account, and that was that. So we worked out of that apartment. Then I got an apartment at 3rd. I was at 18th and Missouri. 18th and Missouri. I got an office above a bar restaurant at 3rd and Missouri. I think that was it. 3rd and Missouri. 3rd Street runs all along the bay, and so above the bar. So then I got a local phone connection between the two offices, and then I hired more people, and that's where we stayed for quite some time. From there, I moved to 2nd Street, 524 2nd Street, when we were the only people there. I mean, this was, in fact, it was right by a place called South Park. South Park. This whole area is I mean, that's where you want to live now, or where you want your offices. And in fact, across the street is where Macworld ended up moving in. It was a huge building. I remember they jackhammered it for a year. I had to listen to it. But we were like the first company that moved down there. It was Needle Park. South Park was Needle Park, basically. Now you couldn't afford to live there. So we were there, and we were there a number of years. Then I moved to 544, right next door. I had a 3-story building, and we had, and we grew, added other magazines, and I had, I think at one time we had 65 people working there.
Wow.
You know, I had mail order business. I had a couple of other magazines, and so on. So it grew pretty nicely over those few years, from 82 to 90.
I noticed that for the first 13 issues, you were listed as both editor and publisher, which I guess just speaks to the relatively small size of the magazine. I think it's kind of unusual for the person to do both.
Yeah, I think that was just... was DeWitt listed there? DeWitt Robeloff? He must have been.
I don't remember. I have to check.
Oh. Well, DeWitt was the editor.
I think he started. I think he started showing up around issue 14 or so.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Because I remember him earlier than that, but that's. But DeWitt was the editor. You know, it might have been just ego on my part. I really don't recall. I don't recall. But if when DeWitt took over, I listed him. He was the true editor. Mm-hmm. He was the writer, editor, and he and I collaborated, along with other people on the content, the covers, all that stuff. You know?
So who was the audience, like, initially, and did it change over time?
Not that I recall changing. Yeah. You were the audience.
I was the audience.
And people like you, and people my age. I mean, at the time when I launched the magazine, I was 35. So from your age to my age, we were all consumed by the same thing. I had professional programming experience, but that aside, what consumed those of us involved in the home computer phenomenon was some underlying feeling that compelled us to pursue this thing. It was fascinating. It was interesting. It was empowering. There was. I think a sense that this was the beginning of something, and you know, we just couldn't get enough of it. So, whatever your age, it was this notion, this feeling that ran through all of us, I think.
I agree. So
yeah, I mean, you can speak about it yourself. I mean, you were there. How old were you then when you were getting Antic?
12.
Yeah. That's about right. And now there were a lot of 12-year-olds that weren't as interested in computers as you.
Yes.
I'm sure you knew many of them, or you didn't know them, but they were out there. You know, you hung out with guys that were interested in it. Your dad, as I recall reading in your book, got you interested, or certainly supported your interest.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's a nice thing. Other kids your age weren't, but people like you got the magazine. I used to get letters all the time. All age groups. from all over the country, all over the world.
Does any particular letter or subscriber stick in your mind as something interesting? All right.
No,
right.
Everything. There was a time I would have been able to answer that, but not anymore.
All right, that's fine. How'd you get your first advertisers?
I sold them. I called. Once again, I got these, remember I had the other magazines.
Sure.
And of course, a magazine publisher, one of the things you do is you source advertisers from the magazines that you compete with, or that are collateral, or that are peripheral to your market space, and you source the names and phone numbers and so on that way, and you get started that way. And as you pursue it, you grow the list. I remember talking to a guy. I'd never done any of this. I'd never produced a magazine. I didn't know anything about it. I'll tell you one thing, though. I remember being a kid, being fascinated by magazines. I always loved magazines. I always loved bookstores. And as a family, we always went to the library. So we were, as a family, very very word-oriented. But I remember always looking at mastheads. I used to tell people this story. I used to look at mastheads. I don't know why. I used to look at them and go, I wonder what that job means. What is that title? What is that? It just used to intrigue me, because there was mastheads on a big magazine. There's just 1 million people listed.
Sure.
And I always used to wonder, what the hell do they do? What does that title mean? Well, that's just an aside. But I never did any of this. I remember, so I sold all the ads. And the way I did, I got on the phone again early in the morning. So if I wasn't selling to somebody, convincing them to carry my magazine, I was talking to somebody about advertising in the magazine. I remember talking to a guy. I said, I told him about what I was doing. He said, yeah, well, that's pretty interesting. I said, well, have you ever done a magazine before? I said, no. He said, you ever sell advertising? I said, no. He said, do you have any distribution? I said, I'm working on it. He said, give me a full page. I answered no just about any important question he asked.
Right, yeah.
But I'll tell you something that I used to say to everyone. My uncle, who was an attorney, a successful one in Silicon Valley, I went to him because he told me, he said, hey, if you ever think about doing a business, come see me. I got some dough on.
Mm-hmm.
So I put the touch on him. He didn't come up with any money, but I talked to him at some length about it. And he said, listen, he said, I don't much understand what you're up to. He said, if it were a couple of other businesses, I might be more interested. I'm sorry, I can't really help you out financially. But he said, I'll tell you this one thing. He said, you're enthusiastic. And he said, my experience is that in business, enthusiasm can make up for almost everything. And I never forgot that. And he was absolutely right. Mm-hmm. And it's called many things now. I'm sure you're on the internet as much as I am, with all the new stuff going on, all these apps and new websites, and a lot of it's derivative stuff, in my opinion. But people are quite successful, and it's interesting to me to read their analysis of their business and their tips. From the entrepreneur, the great entrepreneurs of the day. The great entrepreneurs, of course, are those who have made $1 billion. Right. That's what great is. But basically, I never see this written, but it underlies a lot of what's said anecdotally, as well as the tablets from the mountaintop. This is what so and so said. Well, I'll tell you what I say. Enthusiasm makes up for everything. If you don't have it, you won't succeed. If you don't have the passion, the compelling drive, you'll have a very difficult time. And I used to see it a lot. I used to see the other side of that a lot. People would come to me and say, and for a long time, a lot of years, people wanted to hear how to do their own business. Sure. And I would indulge people quite a bit, because I was always enthusiastic about it. So I would sit down with people, and almost invariably I'd walk away going, they're never going to make it. And the reason I would say this, not always, but almost always, is they would always have too many objections. Well, yeah, but what happens about this? And if you have too many objections, you better just go get a job with somebody else. Because if you become your own worst enemy, how the hell could you succeed? Right. I mean, there are enough obstacles that family and friends will place in front of you, and enough doubts sowed by those around you who mean well. Right. That will cause you some agita, some serious pain. Jesus, I don't know what man, and maybe he's right, you know. So if you allow yourself, if you indulge yourself in that direction, you're going to fail. You won't be able to succeed. You become your own. It's like wearing cement shoes, and I used to see that quite frequently. And you can't be that way. You just can't and start a business and run the business successfully. You have to be driven, and not let anything get in your way. Now, there's a double-edged sword there. I failed numerous times with that same philosophy. There's times when you do have to say, enough's enough.
Right.
This isn't going to work. It's a bad idea, or the market's not right, or I'm just not the right person for it, or something.
Passion isn't everything, but it's 80%, right?
Yeah, it's not a sufficient condition, but it's a necessary condition. I think that's the best way to look at it.
Awesome. So as I was reading through the issues, just kind of going through editorial after editorial and letters from people, just trying to kind of find trends, just and what I expected in my mind was like letters about whether piracy was good or bad. It seems like you guys didn't get so much into that, but what I did see was like campaigns to write to publishers. Like over the course of years, Antic seemed like it was driving these campaigns to like tell software publishers to support Atari, and was that?
I don't remember that.
Oh, I was going to ask if that was like an agenda on your.
I'm sure it was. Remember, we were passionate Atari people.
Yeah.
And Atari was getting the short end of the stick. Now, we had, for when I first started, it was owned by Time Warner.
Warner Communications.
Time Warner. And a guy named Ross, what the hell was his name? Was the CEO before Jack Trammell bought it.
I don't know his name.
Ross. What the hell was his first name? Can't remember. Anyway, they sold it. They sold it. It was typical corporate America in that they didn't know what they had their hands on. They just didn't know. They thought it was a failing business. Atari owned the game market.
Sure.
And then they did the computers, and they didn't do so well there. Apple II owned that market, and Commodore was the second place product after Apple II, and that it was cheaper, and it gained the traction. But Atari had a huge following and it did quite well. But they owned the game market. How is it that Nintendo came in and ended up owning the game market? It was just typical American corporate crap. They gave it up. They didn't have what it took to make it, to win that business. They owned it, and they gave it up. Mm-hmm. They sold it to Jack, and then, and that was the end of it. And anyway.
All right, well, jumping ahead in my questions here, I'd like to...
American business people, yeah, go ahead.
No, so go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, in watching what transpired, Nintendo is a perfect example. How is it that Nintendo ended up owning the game market? Well, for that period of time that they did. Yeah. Atari owned it.
Yeah.
They failed. And that's a typical example of American corporate culture not able to succeed. They were their own worst enemies, basically. Yeah. Anyway.
Can you talk about your relationship with Atari before and after the Trammels took over? I mean, was there editorial pressure? No. Did they ignore you? Did they help you?
They didn't give a shit.
They didn't give a shit.
Well, I shouldn't say they did. Jack was a street fighting guy. I don't know if you know anything about Jack.
Yeah.
Interesting guy. One of my board of advisors, Don Richard, was his right-hand guy. I speak to Don still regularly. Don was on my board of advisors. He worked for Jack for off and on quite some time. Ended up interim president of Commodore for a while. He loved Jack. Now, Jack was a Jew, a survivor of Auschwitz. He was a consummate survivor. And he took this when he emigrated. I think this informed the rest of his life. He was a street fighting guy. And with good smarts and good instincts, some luck. Everyone needs a little luck. And hell of a guy. So he understood the role, the ecosystem, the magazine, but he wasn't about to give me any undue credit. He wasn't about that. But I remember having parties and inviting him and his family, his sons. I knew all the sons. Mm-hmm. Sig Hartman, I knew Sig pretty well. And they would attend our parties. They weren't arrogant. Mm-hmm. Well, they were arrogant. They were not with me. They understood the ecosystem. They understood one. But in terms of, to answer your question, I received no pressure to say good or bad or indifferent things. They simply were about what they were about, and they had I think they felt, and probably rightfully, that they had their fate in their own hands, and I could help a little or hurt a little, but nothing that was significant. They'd rather be helped, but I worked with them. We had a decent relationship, as I recall. Mm-hmm. I could get meetings when I needed them. I got information when I needed it, and so forth. But he passed on. Jack did last year, I think it was. Yeah. And his breed is gone. I mean, the people I read about now on the internet, the businesses they're forming, and so. They're a feat by comparison. I mean, this guy was the real deal. He was an interesting guy, and now perhaps in this day and age he would not be able to succeed. That's a double-edged sword. When I kind of look at what's going on now, and I say what I say, but perhaps he would not succeed in this current environment. He probably would. It's a different world, different day.
So the last issue of Antic was June 1990, Volume 9, Number 2, and it seems to me, as a reader, that the end came as a surprise. You were still requesting programs in the last issue, and then all of a sudden it folded into Start. And then the end of Start came less than a year later, and that seemed like a surprise too.
Yeah, I don't remember. Those were some painful years, actually.
Yeah.
The end of this was a difficult time for me, and it sort of kind of came undone. Once again, going back to what I said a few minutes ago, when driven by passion and commitment and belief. It's hard to witness the crumbling of this thing that you've helped create and that you've hung the meaning of your life on, so to speak. And so it was some difficult times, emotionally as well as real in the real business world, financially, and so on. And I suffered in a lot of different ways. So I really don't recall. I didn't know that was the last issue, and I guess. But it was the end. It was the end of those times. Amiga and Atari were all failing. It was over. And I really wasn't smart enough. I didn't migrate. I didn't get on with it.
Yeah.
Probably my failing, actually.
You were one of the relatively few computer magazines to not sell out to a bigger publisher. IDG
I was offered.
Or Zip. Were you? Tell me about it.
Yeah. Early on, the first year I had Antic, Pat McGovern showed up in my apartment, offered to buy me.
Can you say that again? You glitched out.
True story.
I didn't hear you any of it. Say it again.
I said in the first year, the second year, that Antic was in business. Mm-hmm. Pat McGovern, the owner of IDG, called me, asked for an appointment, came over to my apartment, stepped over all the boxes and shit. There he was in his, very expensive suit.
Right.
Yeah, and nice guy, by the way, smart guy, nice guy. Came in, didn't give a shit about any of that. It didn't bother him at all. He'd started that way himself, and offered to buy it. And man, I wasn't having any of it. I just turned it down.
Because it was still your passion?
Yeah. I mean, it was, I think, the second year. And I thought, I don't know. I don't know what I was thinking. I don't think I was thinking too straight. Probably, had I done that, things would have been different. But not necessarily better, I suppose.
Were there other offers that came later?
On Antic, no. By then, after that offer, things were sorting themselves out. The PC was really the consummate product, not Apple II. It was the PC. IBM announced PC Junior. Then PC World came out, and PC Magazine. There was a big split there. Dave Bonnell was with his buddy. What the fuck was his name? It started PC Magazine. One of the partners screwed the other, so Dave Bonnell went off and started PC World with Pat McGovern's money. And then Macworld came out and so forth. So, no, I didn't get any other offers on that product. Didn't try. I was just consumed by it. I was just busy doing my thing. And frankly, I had I been smarter, I probably would have made money, I suppose.
Can you talk a little bit about the spinning off of the ST stuff into Start?
Well, we had to address it. I mean, the Atari, the 16-bit chips were coming online, and the Mac, and so Atari had to address it, and the Amiga, Commodore had to address it, and so we had to in the magazine, and so we saw ourselves in an Atari magazine. And so we had to do that. So we came up with a Start, and that's how that came to be.
Okay.
It's just a necessity.
And you tried. I know we're going to get to your later magazines in a minute, but it seems like you tried some other magazines back in the time. You tried an Amiga magazine for a few issues, right?
Amiga Plus.
Amiga
Plus.
And
that was out for more than a few issues, actually.
Was it?
I think, well, maybe a year. I don't know. It was out for a little bit.
Volume 2, number 5. So,
all right.
Maybe 16 issues.
Yeah, I suppose.
And there was 2 Computing. I think you did for.
Yeah, Apple II Computing. And I think we ended up calling it 2 Computing. I think we couldn't use the name Apple. I've forgotten how that worked. That was around for a while. And that was our desire to kind of expand, but that didn't work. So I tried a bunch of different things trying to expand the business, basically. But what I didn't do was hire professional publishers besides myself to make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't invest in the business other than my own ideas. So.
Other projects in the Antic world. I mean, there was the one book, Volume 1, that was never
yeah, right.
And there was the software sales, the Antic software, and then you guys were on Plato and CompuServe and kind of
dabbling there.
Dabbling in other projects.
One of the successful pieces of software ended up migrating to Autodesk. Cyber Studio.
Mm-hmm.
And what the hell is the other one? Cyber Studio. Autodesk, I didn't have, well, I don't want to really get into the details. There's some just mistakes made. But I didn't have the contracts I thought I had for the PC version of these things that we developed. And so off it went with the internal guy and the external guy, and they made a lot of money with Autodesk. But those were Cyber Paint and Cyber Studio were 2 very successful, very sophisticated graphics programs on the Atari ST, more so than almost any other machine. And they got migrated to PC and became stalwarts at Autodesk. Those programs.
Did not know that.
Yeah.
Right. So, what are you of your stuff at Antic? What are you most proud of?
Oh, I think a couple things. I think the doing of it, the accomplishments, over that period of time. I believe in the hiring people too. I have to tell you, I gave a lot of people a start in business. I was always sort of a maverick when it came to the principles of business and hiring and firing and so on. I probably wasn't the best boss all the time, but I gave a lot of people an opportunity. And the reason was I didn't really care what you had done. I didn't care what your degree was in. I cared about you. What could you deliver? Going back to what I said earlier about passion and being, you're lucky when you get people that work for you that have that, and you can't buy it, and you can't earn it, and you can't teach it. It just comes with the person that walks in the door to one degree or another. And I hired a lot of people looking for that, and just based on instinct, and was very happy to have a number of people working around me that were. I always look for people better than me, which was probably easy to find, actually, in a lot of ways. But I was never frightened by smart, successful people. To me, that's what I wanted. I wanted people like that. I mean, who the hell wants morons around? I mean, I wanted people that could do more than I could do, not less. And was very fortunate to have a number of them. Had I been a better boss, we would have had a better business. Had I been it would have been better. There were opportunities there that I let get through my fingers, I think, both with people and the business opportunity itself, that I just didn't grasp. I didn't know how to develop them or allow them to develop. So yeah, I'm most proud, I think, of that I hired a few hundred people, hundreds, over those years, and gave people their start from 82 to 2001.
What was, so let's talk about what you're proud of. What was for you most frustrating or anger making? Was it?
Go ahead.
No. I should have stopped.
Oh, just my own. I think retrospectively, my failings. That is, I used to run around, every now and then think of the Marlon Brando speeching on the waterfront. I could have been somebody, Charlie. You don't understand. I could have been somebody. Something along those lines.
Yeah. But it was, in other ways, it was a huge success. I mean, you created an incredible community, and you brought people together. And
Yep. But you got to understand, I was a driven guy, and the success for me, I could have been somebody. So that was, and that aside, even if you drop that, if you just set that aside, that is, I'm probably most sensitive to the failings that I created. I mean, I failed any number of ways, and it's always been hard for me. I've let it go. It's been a lot of years, but that was the most, I think, the serious thing that kind of wore me down is my own failings. When in fact, had I done this or that a little differently, things would have turned out differently. But you're right. There was a big community, and the magazines were well received, and so on. So there is that, and I had a lot of nice people working, and gave a lot of people their start.
All right. So, Start shuts down, and it's done. What happened? What'd you do next?
I started PC Home Journal, the PC home market.
Okay.
You might think that's a little late, but this was 91 or 92, right in there somewhere. Right. And now, by then, I was down to like 2 dimes to rub together. So I didn't have many resources, very little staff, just a few people left, and we were just scrabbling, just hard scrabble. It was just fighting for our lives. We were at 544 2nd Street, the 3-story building. I subleased lower space. Randy Stickrod took part of it. Louis Rosetto and Jane, the founders of Wired, took part of it. Wired was founded in my building. The guys that started Boing Boing, you know Boing Boing?
Sure.
Mark Freuenfelder and his wife, they started in my building. You know, who wrote, what? Yeah, David Eggers. You know who David Eggers is?
Yeah, sure.
He broke up.
Yeah, Dave Eggers?
Yeah, he started in my building. So I subleased all those guys. Interesting. They were all there at the same time.
Wow.
Interesting group. A few years younger than I, 15 years probably. But interesting guys. Now the internet was just beginning to be heard from. So I started PC Home Journal. It was modestly successful. CMP, a big publishing company on the East Coast, decided they were going to buy us. And basically what they did was came and interviewed me and stole all my... I foolishly gave them all the information and they never came back.
Yeah.
And they launched a magazine called Home PC. That was disappointing. Because they basically played me, as near as I could tell. I mean, they said, we're interested in buying you, but we'd like to... They flew people out. I flew back there. They interviewed. I told them everything I could tell them, and then never heard from them again. Big chintzy. That's the way I remember it. That's the way it happened. So I launched Mac Home Journal. I shut down PC Home Journal. They launched Home PC. I shut it down, and launched Mac Home Journal. When Apple was moving very strongly, and they launched the Performa line, and that was for the home, very very actively directed at home market. Mm-hmm. And so I thought the magazine might go along, and it did pretty well for a number of years.
That's where we first intersected, I think. I was
going to ask you. I don't remember how.
Yeah, I was a freelance writer and writing for Mac Home Journal.
Oh, you were?
Yeah.
Who hired you? What editor? Do you know?
I don't remember now.
It wasn't Ed Prazik, was it?
The name doesn't ring a bell. No.
Sandra?
I didn't Sandra. Yeah.
Sandra. Sandra was our first editor. And she was interesting.
Yeah, and I was writing for it and reading it for probably months before reading the masthead.
Yeah.
I was like, that name, Jim, that sounds really familiar. And then and then I remembered you from Antic. So, you know. All right, so I know you've done other magazines since then. Let's see. At one point, I have an email from you. You were talking about Smart, the baby boomer magazine, and then you were talking about low carb living, and now you're doing the Louisiana.
Yeah, we looked at the baby boom magazine and didn't do it. We ended up doing low carb living for a couple of years. Mm-hmm. And basically that did extremely well and then collapsed in weeks. Kind of took me with it. And then we did an iPod magazine, just that was short-lived. Mm-hmm. And it was called, what the hell was it called? Do you remember what it was called? What's that? Oh, that's right. It was called Podmania. And I wrote Steve Jobs, asked him for permission to use iPod Buyer's Guide, and he wouldn't let me use it. I just should have done it anyway. And, he couldn't stop me.
Right. But
I did that, and I felt obligated at that point then to find another name. So I called it Podmania. And then we moved east, and for a variety of some family reasons, and helped my parents and so on. And then Susan, my wife, took a job down here in New Orleans on another magazine, food magazine, and they were in trouble, and that's what she and I did, was publishing. So she turned them around, actually tripled the size of their business in 4.5 years. And then she went off and started her own, called Louisiana Kitchen and Culture, which is, the other magazine was recipes, and Louisiana Kitchen and Culture basically celebrates Louisiana's heritage, culture, and cuisine. So it really is not only recipes, but it is people and places that contribute to what I think makes Louisiana unique, and that's the difference in Louisiana kitchen culture and anything else you might see out there. So that's what brings us here. A couple other magazines I've done that you don't know about. I did a RC model magazine called Model Shopper for a short period of time. It was modeled after. Remember Computer Shopper?
Sure.
That big, thick.
I wrote for them too. Yep.
Magazine.
It's not a big, thick magazine anymore.
No, nothing is anymore. But it was back in the day. I mean, it was probably 300 pages, and large format and so on. So I was into RC and have been off and on my whole life, airplanes and so on. And so I thought I'd mimic it, and I did that for a while. It was never successful, so I folded it. But that was in the late 80s. So I was always, I liked starting things. It was a lot of fun. So now we're here in Louisiana. I'm helping Susan with Louisiana Kitchen and Culture. I do the website and the newsletter and the technology end of it, the FileMaker database for subscribers, and all that kind of stuff. All the stuff I know how to do, and then I'm on the lookout for. I have some ideas about some businesses, but I haven't really been able to get strongly motivated. I dabble. I use Drupal. It's a content management system, a very sophisticated one and a troublesome one in many ways.
Yes.
But but it's very powerful, and I've been able to mimic any number of ideas using it, model them. Mm-hmm. So I'm sitting on a couple of things every now and then. I mess around. Views in Time was one of them, actually. But I haven't. I get excited about it and develop it and look at it and then go, the hell with it, and go on to something else.
Okay.
So I let it sit there.
Do you read computer magazines today?
No. Nope.
Not interested, or?
I probably not interested. That consumed me for years. But do you read them?
No, they're not interesting anymore.
Yeah, I think that's it. I'm on the internet 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
I wake up at 5. I'm typically up at 5, do a little meditating, yoga stuff, and get on the computer. And I'm off and on throughout the day, throughout the entire day. Until I go to bed, I'm in front of the thing. And I sit here with my Mac Pro and my monitor over here, and that's what I do. So yeah, those days are gone. What is there to read? What would you read now? I still get interested every now and then in programming. I taught myself how to program the iPhone. Very difficult, by the way, for me anyway. It was because I'm not an object-oriented programmer. I was a procedural programmer.
Right.
Object-oriented seemed to me some strange artifice that people made up, some design model that they kind of stuck on top of programming. It was like, why the hell did they bother with all that? Well, that's how unsophisticated I am about it. I couldn't tell you why they did it. But anyway, I struggled with this stuff, and Stanford has a good online program. And I came up with iPhone Works, and I thought about doing something with that. That's why I own that URL. And, I learned enough to write a Sudoku program. That was my thing. And then I kind of lost interest. I'm pretty impressed with Apple's technology, though, I have to tell you. It's a very sophisticated set of tools. And the Objective-C goes all the way back to Next, which Steve Jobs owned in the late 80s.
Sure.
And Objective-C is a very robust language. And in fact, Java came out of Objective-C in some ways. There were Objective-C programmers that developed Java. So anyway, so I did that. So I still sort of dabbled here and there, but I tend to lose interest. I tend not to be as passionate over the long run that it takes to actually launch something. I lose interest. Or what happens is that little voice that happens to all of us, that won't work. You know that feeling? That'll never work. Well, you can't have that if you're going to actually do something. If you allow that voice to take over, you will not launch a business. I guarantee. There's no way. It just won't happen because you'll be listening to that voice saying, that's not any good. Well, you then stop doing it, and 3 months later, you see the same idea. Some guy go raise $5 million behind it.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Do you own an Atari computer anymore?
You know, interesting. No, I don't. I don't know what happened to any of it. I've seen, you got me hooked up with Marty. You know who I'm talking about at the Atari Museum?
Yeah,
the writer.
Yeah.
God, his last name escapes me right now. Anyway, he contacted me. Are you on that Facebook page, the Atari Museum? And
yeah.
And I've seen pictures of all these old STs and Atari 800s and 400s, and it's kind of interesting to me because I haven't looked at it in 15 years, if not longer. Yeah. So it's interesting to me to see all that since it was. I mean, I was consumed by that stuff for a long time, and very familiar to me. I had all of those floppy disks and the cartridge memory and the Atari 800 and monitors and all of that stuff. 48K memory was a big deal.
Yeah, you're never going to use that much memory.
Yeah.
Okay, going back to Antic, something I want to jump back to. I just want to fish for stories of interesting people you met, interesting things you did. Maybe you went to a World of Atari or conference or something.
Well, I did a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, sure.
I wish I could remember. I mean, there was a time I would have been able to answer that particular question. I went to so many trade shows around the world, actually, and I was in Germany for an Atari event. I was the CESs, which I always used to like. Atari was a big deal, and we always had booths there. Comdex was a big deal. I mean, those are big shows. And in terms of people, I wish I could think, but nothing comes to mind. But there were. I mean, I met a number of people, and we had on Antic or on Start, we had Mick Fleetwood on Start cover. We had, I can't think. We had a bunch of people on. What's that? Oh, we had John Madden. He was on the Mac Home Journal cover. Yeah, we had John Madden. We had a lot of people on covers that we contacted. And I'm trying to think who else. So we had some musicians like Mick Fleetwood I mentioned, but some others as well. I just can't think of them right now. Who we met. And... so there were people like that, but nothing comes to mind.
That's fine. It's hard. I understand just pulling it up. Yeah. When I was working on, it took me my book, worked on it for a year, and I'd be writing.
Shit, the way you made it sound was you wrote it in about 3 weeks. I was following you on Facebook.
Yeah, that's not how it worked.
That's not how it was.
Anyway, I'd write, and there was okay, that's it. That's everything. And then I'd wake up in the morning and just a whole new thing would come to me that I'd completely forgotten about. The more you use it, it just comes back.
Sure.
So it's kind of unfair for me to just go, tell me an interesting story, Jim. I understand.
Oh, okay. I've been waiting to tell somebody this for 20 years.
Right.
There was a time I could have actually had something interesting to respond with, but not anymore.
So, if you could send a message to today's Atari hobbyists, and you can right now, what would you tell them?
I would say hang on to the equipment in your magazines. Hang on to what's the term I'm looking for? The iconic stuff. The pictures I've seen on that Facebook page. That representative of a time that's only yesterday, but long gone, never be repeated. it's over. There was a short period of time when it sort of came on the world so fast, and all of a sudden it consumed everybody. Not everyone, but you and I know who we're talking about. Everyone that we were friends with was consumed by the same thing.
Yeah.
Everyone else is wondering what the hell's going on. They were going, yeah, what is this with computers? What is it with you guys? What are you doing? And well, I don't know, but that's what we're interested in, and it just is all consuming. So there is something to it, and if you lived it, you want to hang on to some of that. Not morbidly, but I don't have any of it, and I got rid of it in some ways purposefully. I just got rid of it, all that stuff. I don't have anything that reminds me of my successes or failures. Probably failures more than anything. And I've often thought about doing, in fact, my Views in Time website that I started was going to be, it still could be, because I work on it every now and then, a virtual reunion website. And part of it that came from this notion of, I wonder what's happened to all the people from 1982 on that I hired, hundreds. Many have gone on. I see their names pop up. Very successful careers. And so I thought, gee, it might be interesting to do a class reunion,
Yeah.
So that's where the Views in Time idea came from. I mean, I enlarged it from that. It sprang from that idea, and then I enlarged it to be a whole lot of other things. And then, of course, never did anything with it. But so to answer your question, I don't know if I have a good answer. It's if it's important to you, keep it on your desk or bundle it up and store it for your kids. It'll be a collector's item if it's not already. But I don't have. I guess it was a time and a place for it, and it was very exciting. But it's gone now. That's over. And
that's true.
But what intrigues me is that you contacted me, and Marty did, and that and then the websites, which I knew I gave you permission to do the website, right? I've never been to it. You know that?
No, I didn't know
I've never been to your website.
Huh.
I mean, that's how I feel about it. It's in the past for me, and it's not always pleasant memories.
Right.
I have a lot of good memories, but towards the end, you have to remember this whole thing collapsed around. I mean, it just... So I have avoided any contact with it. And to this day, I haven't gone to your website. What do you have on it? Do you have the magazines on it?
My website has the full text of the magazines.
All of them?
All of the Antic and the Start.
Really?
Yeah, full text. And we did this before, we did most of it before PDF was really viable.
Yeah.
People didn't have the bandwidth, and it just,
right.
So we OCR'd everything, converted it all to text and then to HTML. So we have the full searchable text.
Wow.
Of everything, and every program, all downloadable.
No kidding.
Into your emulator or whatever. Over at archive.org, my friend Jason has got, he's a computer archivist, and he has the full page scans of all the Antic and the Start, and also Creative Computing and just any other magazine. Yeah. So you could
get my library. He would have had magazines all the way back to 78, I think. He would have had magazines 77 or 78. Creative Computing. He would have had microcomputing. There was a bunch of them.
Well, maybe we can get it back from the Chinese.
The Chinese, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, basically today, if someone wants access to any Atari magazine or book ever published, pretty much you can get it online, and it's massive.
And that's interesting to me. It's not anything. Maybe someday I'll go visit. So now I'm a friend of the Facebook site, so I get that stuff trickles in over the transom, but I haven't. And I've posted in response to a couple of postings. I've added my 2 cents to a couple of things for clarification, but nothing more than that. And I've scanned your book. I haven't read it yet. And looking at the kind of the subheads, just getting a sense of how it flows, and so that kind of brought back a lot of stuff. Just looking at the book you sent me. Thank you for that, by the way.
You're welcome.
And so that was interesting for me to kind of dip my toe in it, so to speak, because you have to remember I was consumed by this. That's all I did.
Yeah.
I'd get up in the morning early, and I'd go to bed late. And that's all I did for years. Just to see it again is kind of interesting to me.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Cool. So, first of all, I think my interview is. I have one more thing to talk about, but I think the interview portion is done, and I thank you very much.
Sure. What are you going to do with this, by the way? I don't even know.
I'm going to do two things with it. An edited version of this. We're going to edit down to 15 or 20 minutes. The good parts.
You mean it's not all good?
The best parts
Yeah.
are going to go into my podcast. I have me and a couple of other guys have a Atari podcast. It is called Antic because you picked the best name for an Atari thing ever. So
people know it was named after the chip.
Yes.
Most people.
Yeah, everyone knows that. I mean, all of us Atari geeks know that. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
That'll be go into this month's podcast, and then the whole enchilada will go up on archive.org, just every word of it, along with probably a transcript. And if someone really wants to hear every word you have to say, it'll be there. And then they'll keep everything there forever. So in 100 years, if someone wants to know about the history of publishing Antic, it'll be there. So.
Well, it's I'm not sure that's the history. It was interesting times, and so many different things happened. I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah.
So it was so once again, lots of people came to me and said, "How do I start my own business? You did it and help me out." I said, "Sure." Somebody said, "Well, weren't you afraid?" I said, "Afraid of what? I had $800. What the hell was I going to lose?"
Right.
But when someone asked me that, I knew they weren't going to succeed at anything. Weren't you afraid? Never occurred to me.
Yeah.
And if it does, if that's all that's on your mind, you're going to have a difficult time of it. So I was fortunate in that I didn't know what I didn't know. And believe me, there was a ton. I didn't know anything about publishing.
Yeah.
Nothing. The woman I lived with at the time, Marnie Tabscott was her name, she was working as a typesetter. So that's how we got the first issue typeset. She did it off hours.
Wow.
And then she and I pasted it up. I didn't know anything about paste up, but I learned pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you know anything about paste up.
The waxer and put it down.
The waxer, you cut the type and then you lay it out. I mean, in paragraphs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There was just so many things in the people and so. Some are gone now already. Anyway.
Yeah. So Ed, when I'm done with this and we get the podcast done and uploaded, the other thing I emailed you about months ago, and you didn't hear it, so I'm going to ask again. Was what I'd really like to do is do a book or a Kindle or something of Best of Antic, kind of a Best of Antic Volume 2, but it'd be the kind of a historical perspective of what's interesting to readers now.
Mm-hmm.
And just take some of the most interesting articles and republish them in book format. The ones that remain interesting, for whatever reason. We'll probably have people vote on them or something. And I just want to kind of run that by you.
Yeah, I don't think I have a problem with that.
Cool.
So how would you present this? How would you sell it? Would it be in paper?
Most likely it would be definitely Kindle, because that's easiest.
You broke.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Definitely on Kindle, because that's the easiest and cheapest way to go.
Is it?
And
have you played with Apple's book authoring program?
Mm-mm.
You know the one I'm talking about?
Yeah. iBook Publisher.
Yeah, that's it.
So I mean, we could do it on Apple. I mean, what I mean is definitely.
I'd like my
ebooks.
name on it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Send me the request. Send me the request. I'll give you permission.
Okay. And then we'll. I don't want to say for sure.
I don't know that. I don't know if permission is required, but send it anyway.
Okay. Yeah. That's just safer. And I would. I don't want to guarantee it, but I would be inclined to do a paper version because I like paper versions.
Yeah, so do I.
And we'll just use a print on demand. That's easy, to do.
Yeah.
So.
Is that what you did with your first book?
Yeah.
Print on demand?
Mm-hmm.
How'd that work?
Great. I used Amazon Create Space.
Yeah.
And they did a beautiful job. I think the books look great. It's exactly what I had in mind. So.
Did you sell any of them?
Enough. My goal. It was a project of passion, and my goal was to write the book.
That's what I was talking about right there.
My goal was to write the book and not to sell any. So but it is selling. So
that's nice. That's nice. Mazel tov. Those are that's nice when you get what you didn't expect, but privately we're hoping for.
Right. And if we do an Antic book, it's going to be the same thing. I mean, it's going to sell 100 copies,
Yeah. It's but still, it might be nice.
Yeah.
The whole print on demand, the whole business has changed. I think that's probably sounds like you got some people out there that are interested. Now Marty's going to write something, volume 2 on his Atari Corporation.
Right. Yeah, that's going to be a 3-volume set. They say.
Yeah.
The first one was.
So I asked Don on his behalf, and I'm still waiting to hear from Don Richard whether he wants to participate or not as an interviewee. I'm not sure he does, but still waiting to hear. But there's plenty of people to talk to on Atari after Jack bought it. I think Sig's still around. Jack's gone. The Sons are still around. They were all involved. Yeah. And a bunch of people. Yeah. So he could probably get enough interviews to make it interesting.
He managed to get the first book was only 800 pages, so
that's what he told me. Oh, in fact, he sent me the PDF. I think he gave me the reviewer's code off Amazon, so I got it, and I sent it to Don. He wanted me to send it to Don so Don could see what the hell he was doing. And, I'm still in touch with one person from Antic old days.
Who's that?
His name's Steve Randall is his name.
Okay.
He lives up in Michigan now. He sold ads for me. He was the first ad director I had. He's the only guy, now that I think about it. He and I Skype, every now and then. And then over the years, there's been a few other people that worked for me since that I've been in touch with. But from the Antic original group, he was one of the original group. He's the only one. One, Les Torek has now died. DeWitt Robeloff, I don't know what happened to him. Who else was around? Geez, I can't think. Oh, Marnie, got married and lives on the East Coast now. She was the original art director. And then I hired a lot of temps, friends, and so forth to help me with individual projects as we needed them, distribution. I can tell you one story. I used to keep the subscription list on the Atari. Okay. I had a database. I used to use Synapse as a database. Remember Synapse?
Sure.
Yeah. They were friends. They were good friends of mine. Ihor Wolosenko and his partner, whose name escapes me right now, and I think lives in Indonesia now, for all I know. Jesus, I can't think of his name. Anyway, I remember one time printing out. So we got the magazines in. Now we had to mail them. So printing out all the labels on a Centronics, dot matrix printer. Mm-hmm. So the labels, printing them out, then sticking them on the covers, and then in my apartment, sorting them by zip code. So, where's Minnesota? It's over there. We'd throw it, so we had stacks of magazines. And then we had to bundle them, tie them and bundle them. Mm-hmm. And then I had to schlep them down to the main post office on in those days in San Francisco, it was on Mission Street, Mission and 2nd. And it was an old building built in by the worst project administration in the Depression. Great old murals and so on. Mm-hmm. So I had to take them there. And I still remember doing that. Every issue, remember we did an issue a month. Did we start by month?
Well, you started off every other month.
Yeah, started off every other month.
And after the first year, you switched to monthly.
Yeah, that's right. And I remember one time I had a little Subaru loaded in the back with sacks of magazines, taking them down to Mission Street in 2nd. And this was around the holidays, so it was wintry, and for San Francisco that means rainy. And I was driving down south of Market, can't remember the street. Anyway, the lights were out. All the lights in that part of town were out. The street lights and so on. So everyone was stop and go. I stopped at an intersection. Someone drove into me. Just drove their car into me. Full speed. Drove into me. Crash. Drove me right through the intersection. Across. People came running out thinking somebody's got to be dead in this thing. Okay. There wasn't a scratch on the car. Not a scratch. And nobody could believe it, including me. There wasn't a scratch on the car. How could that happen? It was an impossible to this day. And I know it was the holidays because I said, well, everyone, that's your Christmas miracle. Yeah. Because nobody could believe it. Everyone thought I was dead. These guys got to be dead. The guy just drove into them full speed. There wasn't a scratch on the car. Huh. To this day, that's a true story. And where I was going was to deliver the magazines down to the main post office, which has since moved out to China Basin. But in those days, it was down still at 2nd and Market and Mission, where it had been for years. Now that area has changed a lot. But anyway, that's a lot of those little odds and ends.
That's what I was looking for. That story.
Yeah. Well, like that happened. Yeah, there was a lot of those. And, I wish I could remember them, but
Cool.
So, anything else I can help you with?
I don't think so. Thank you so much.
Sure. Kind of interesting to talk about again.
Yeah. If you think of anything else, email me or we can Skype again.
I will.
Whatever. Cool.
Sure. If you ever, you got my contact information. I couldn't figure out how your contact. I never did find it. I ended up just entering you, and I don't know what the hell happened. Anyway, we're connected now. It looks like
Skype is black magic. I don't know.
Yeah, it's one of those, like every other program, it's always a pain in the neck. That's why I said, why don't you get that program? I said, no, you know why? Because it demands much more than you think. It demands much more. If you're going to use it, it demands your attention. Because it just never works the way you think it will. And so I'm loath to pick up something new unless I really need it. Yeah. And then only invest myself at the level that I'm going to use it at. In other words, I'm not one of those guys that you see guys with cell phones or their smartphones. They know every little. I don't give a shit. I just use the things I use, and maybe I'm just getting old. I don't know. It's but I've always been that way with programming. Even when I was at NASA as a programmer, most programmers I knew that were any good were lazy, and it's what made us good. Yeah. We just didn't go off on. You just drove yourself to solve the problem in front of you. And if another problem popped up that intrigued you, you saved it for later because you were solving the problem in front of you. So everything that you were doing, and some of the software I dealt with, real-time programming, were very sophisticated interrupt systems, and things would blow up. I mean, it'd take you weeks to find the problem because there was a stack overflow. I mean, there was all kinds of problems. So you just drove yourself. So you'd have volumes of manuals and so on. Those. No, I know where to look in the manuals. I've never read the manuals. I know where to look in the manuals. That's what I know how to do. That's what I've learned to do, is to find an answer to my problem in those manuals. I know I know how to access them, and I'm familiar with. They're my friends now. Have you read them? Only the paragraph I need. Who the hell reads all that stuff? And that's why I've always been with. And that's why all the programs I knew, at least back in the day, were we didn't read manuals. We read the pieces we needed to solve the problem at hand. And if it took us down, you follow a thread a little bit, only as far as you needed to answer the problem that started you on your quest to begin with. So I've always been that way, and that's why I am with all the technology nowadays. It's there's people that know a lot more about all these things than I'll ever know, and I don't care. I use them to my benefit now, and but if I was 13 years old, this is what I'd be doing. I'd be hacking. Actually, I'd be a hacker. That's what I'd do. Yeah, I mean that's fun. It's a challenge. And, I can understand why people do it. Actually, it's a real challenge and camaraderie. Yeah. And so anyway, thanks for the opportunity to talk.
Thanks, Jim.
Sure, we'll maybe talk again.
Very good.
Thanks.
Have a great afternoon.
Yeah, you too. Bye.